Good evening, everyone. My name is Teniola Tayo with the Abuja Literary Society. This is the ALS Book Jam, and we're going to be discussing the story of ALS with Mr. Victor Anoliefo, the founder of ALS, and then eventually with Dike Chukwumerije, the current ALS Programs Director. I also volunteer as the Deputy Programs Director for the Abuja Literary Society. So, Mr. Victor, and now there are two things for you to do. First of all, to introduce yourself, and then to literally launch us into the story of ALS. And we want it in a very chronological order. How did the idea for starting the Abuja Literary Society come to you? What did you do after that? What did you do after that? And then what did you do before we had something called ALS? How did the name occur to you? And what were the first few activities that the community that is now known as the Abuja Literary Society engaged in back in 1998, our others have referred to?
Thank you, Teniola. Good evening. Well, to you all. I think for those of us, I think somebody is here in my own time zone too. Good afternoon. My name is Victor Anoliefo, as I have been introduced, a husband to one and father of four. I'm happy to be part of this process. I call it a process because I do believe, by the grace of God, all this will continue until thy kingdom come, as they say. But essentially, let me go back to first of all, I'm happy to have those of you who turned up. Let me just appreciate at least one of the oldest members I see here, which is Mercy.
Thank you, Mr. Victor.
You're welcome. And then Timmy in particular, who's worked with me briefly for some time, Aisha too, and Alheri Didi, those I know, Sanusi and Joy, the indefatigable team of the Elite Fest. In case I missed out anybody here who's been part of the Elite Fest, please forgive me. So many things have happened over the years that I'm now more like a stranger to something that I'm still part of, but essentially behind the scene. Now, to put it mildly, ALS hasn't always been ALS. When I started this journey, it was called Authors in Abuja. That's a whole story on its own, but I stay focused on the ALS initiative. And ever since Tenny has invited me to do this with the ALS as it is presently constituted, I've been wondering, where do I start? What do I say? What recollections can I have? But essentially, I think the little nuggets I can piece together as chronologically as possible as requested would at least throw some light on the kind of things that have happened in the past. I have granted quite a few interviews in the past. I don't have any recollection as to where the materials might be, both in print and electronic. But all the same, thank God for social media and their capacity to do so much by way of at least keeping records. Now, like I said, Authors in Abuja was the forerunner of Abuja Literary Society. And for those of you who might, well, I don't think anybody here would know, even Messi that started with ALS doesn't know that AIA existed before ALS. Now, when it was Authors in Abuja, the current president of the Court of Appeal, Dangba Memsen, was the chairman of that organization at the time. And I would like to say this very clearly. I think my greatest joy in being part of, no intention of misusing Joy Eugene's name. My greatest joy in this whole process is being part of something and nobody knows who I am. At least those who haven't met me anyway. That's part of the plan. And the reason for that is that everybody who comes on board has a sense of belonging to what they do, how they do it, and the kind of initiatives they take to make the successes that ALS has been known for over these years. And it's not easy to proclaim who you are, what you are, when you like being behind the scene about so many things, and as it were, not counting the cost or the glory moments for those who are involved and just doing the work. Now, when we started out as ALS, it was a hard journey. There was no social media, there was no telephone like this. I used to use a A4 sheet of paper. I'm quite good with a calligraphy pen. So I will design invitations. I will draw a line, share the A4 sheet of paper into 4 parts, do the same design in 4 places to reduce the cost of photocopying, and then cut them up and simply go around in Abuja in those days to ministry offices or wherever there was an established office of people of like mind and hand out invitations. Our first venue at the time was Rockview Hotel.
Yes.
And hello, if somebody remembers. The first venue was Rockview Hotel. And so many things happened between Rockview and the place we called Godi. Godi was one exclusive membership club in Wuse at the time. Now, was it Wuse? No, Maitama. I'm not quite sure now. I think Wuse too.
Wuse too.
But Wuse too, correct? Yeah. Mercy, your memory is stronger than mine. So anyway, I even spoke with the lady who started it out for us there, a retired director at FRCN, Vera Hebuzo. And for a while, we lasted in Godi, and then eventually came the Transcorp Hilton, then Nikon Noga Hilton, and all the facilities we have today that partner with ALS in the things we do. That is, in summary, the kind of trajectory of what ALS has been over these years. But let me also mention at this point that I'd like to appreciate the fact that there were co-travelers that are still playing their parts in different ways, like Kenny Kokere, who is, I think, is running the Abuja Literary Society and the Enugu Literary Society currently. Ferdinand Dago, who is the chairman of the Board of Trustees as is presently constituted. Dr. Ike Anya. And then if I go on mentioning all the names, I don't think I'll do anything else tonight, but I'll stop there and receive any questions and know where to put my mind in chronicling the past as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Victor. So just a note to attendees, as with all of the ALS Book Jam, the floor is permanently open. So at any point, you can raise your hand or type a question in the chat. Well, Mr. Victor, let me just take you back. So you said you were printing information on paper and then distributing them on the streets. Was that what you said?
Yeah, not on the streets per se, like visiting offices. You know, in those days, Abuja was like a desert. So the only offices that were really anywhere to go to were the ministries. And a few of the corporate banks also, where at least you could find people with the kind of intellect or mind you were looking for to be part of what was going on. But let me also say that at that time, I had an office, an advertising agency that I ran at the Women's Center. And part of the attraction to, you know, propel what was happening in my own little space beyond my own capacity was actually taken up by one of the people I mentioned, Dr. Ike Anya. He used to visit my the office then, and he used to enjoy my library. I had like 5 bookshelves stacked in one small space, all personal books, and most of them have disappeared now. And he would always come there and spend hours and hours reading and reading and reading. Then one day he said, why don't I just take some of this responsibility? So at that time, he was called a scribe. Was it? No, he was the scribe. I was the quill master, and Ken was the town crier. So we chose also these quaint names to give ourselves to propel and promote what we were doing.
Yeah.
So that's basically, sorry, what was the question? I hope
so what I was even getting at was, what was the reaction to people, you know, you bring in a flyer about a book club or a literary society? Were they incredulous, or were they, you know, were they very like-minded people that you ended up meeting in the distribution of the flyers?
Oh yeah, well, let me put it this way, it was both, most people didn't care. I mean, sometime by the time you left the offices, you find them in the trash. But a few that connected, the first thing they would say, but sorry for those who don't understand PG, who get this kind of handwriting, you know? So they were marveled at the calligraphy first. They were not even looking at the message, but eventually the information kind of gained attention in many places, because even today, I can't even find, but some people tell me that they still have copies of those flyers up till now.
Really?
And yeah, I have a few members, old members, that have told me that they kept them. They never threw them away. I said, whenever I get back to Nigeria, I hope to get in touch with them. And at the end of the day, it's been some kind of, how do I put it, exciting moments, recalling some of those past moments with some of these people who even remind me of the kind of music and groups they brought together. You know, there was a time we had sessions that were simply a walk-in activity for people from the streets. You know, like you see somebody who could play whatever, or dance, minstrel, whatever, puppeteers, we just go out and invite them, here, come and do this here. And like I said, Godi was a very grand place to, you know, function with. And they had this beautiful grand piano and a lot of musical instruments, percussion instruments, as well as whatever, flutes, trumpets, you name them. So anybody who could play didn't have to own the equipment. They should simply walk in and do it with their own equipments. But all said and done. Yes, sorry.
Godi, G-O-D-I.
G-O-D-I. I hope it was owned by one Eniton Sanusi. They eventually closed down for lack of membership because the price was quite prohibitive. At that time, it was, I think, about 500,000 Naira membership. So you can imagine what it's like.
At that time.
But we had it free. So that's the story of Godi then. And like I said, Transcorp came on the scene, and then we had the British Council moments as well.
Okay.
And we had a few sessions at the public affairs section of the American, not the American embassy per se, but the residence of, I'm trying to remember her name now, but it will come to me before we finish.
Okay, so Mr. Victor, the next question I want to ask you, or the next question that I want to ask you, you've mentioned Rockview, you've mentioned Godi, you've mentioned Transcorp, and all of these places are places that ALS never paid for, you know. So what do you think was that secret sauce? Because there have been lots of initiatives that have gone around trying to find partnerships with people, you know, for venues, because it ties to the question of sustainability. It's one of the reasons why, you know, next year is going to be ALS's 25th anniversary, you know, and we've been able to push along this far. What would you say was the secret sauce? Was it because, luckily for us, was it a thing of luck where in all of these institutions, there were people there that had some level of appreciation for the arts? I know that that was the case with the British Council and maybe to some extent with Transcorp. Or would you say there was a particular way that you approached these people to try to convince them of the value of this kind of partnership? And that was what led to, the long-term partnerships that we had with these guys.
I think it's a mixture of everything you said, but more importantly, you know, like you said, approach matters a lot. And a lot of the behind the scene work I still do up to now, most members even then didn't know what I was doing. And I'll say this clearly, I've always believed in taking the bull by the horn, as it were. I don't believe in man, no man that much, even though I practice it sometimes. But in most cases, I simply just went to the office of whoever the chief executive was and made my demand. And because I always had this beautiful handwriting, by the time I put the notice of intention to see whoever, that's always grabbed the attention of those who were in either the secretary's office or the special assistant or whatever. And by the time it gets to the desk, they're looking and say, wow, who wrote this? They want to see the person. So that always got me in one way or the other. But I'd also like to say that the integrity factor is another thing, because I do know that when you achieve something with that level of integrity that we exercised at the time, it simply propels you to the next opportunity. And I use the example of our relationship with the Royal Netherlands Embassy as an example. And I share this with those of you who might not know about the existence of this book. And I don't know how clearly it comes across. Is it because I blurred my background?
Maybe.
Let me see. This is called Uncle Bola's Promise. Now, this title is not an accident. This is the first anthology of the Abuja Literary Society, and you can see my name there. But why is it called Uncle Bola's Promise? I'll go back a little to why I'm talking about integrity now. I mentioned the late Bola Ige, who was our Attorney General at the time. And by the time he got interested in being part of ALS, I know the groundwork that went behind the scene to achieve that. He would drive himself to the venues without the trappings of his security and all whatnot, simply to come and sit down with us and enjoy the presence of the muse. And he did a lot of the time, even helping me arrange. He always came on time as early as possible. And it was in the process of helping me put the chairs together one evening at Godi that he made a promise, say, hey, Victor, you should put together a book. There's so many people doing so many wonderful stuff. That's how this came about. So I called it Uncle Balance Promise because he died before the book came into, production or was published. So I would also like to, at this point, mention the fact that when we had the first tourism and culture minister, Dike, he and a few other ministers, in fact, what he did was he facilitated a proposal we put together for Obasanjo to acknowledge our presence in the city as coordinators of a major event that brings the diplomatic community together and the people of creative kinds all over the world, you understand? So from all over the world. So Obasanjo bought it as what we call the first Kunu Ago. Kunu Ago is the Gwari word for culture house, which was like a resonance on the essence of togetherness in a hut or village environment with all the diplomatic community and ministers. So we call it Ministers' Culture House in English, but Kunu Ago, by way of the affection of the being in the Federal Capital Territory. But Kunu Ago was a huge success, and it was a session for the high placed people to be with everybody. But one thing I must say also is that ALS gave opportunity for people who were the nobodies in the creative industry to network with the somebodies that could facilitate the means and the ways and means for them to be, achievers in their own rights.
Okay.
And what I say to that, before I let you ask the next question, is that even at that time, when it was difficult to be a member of the British Council, or less not difficult, it was expensive, ALS had a corporate membership. So I reached an agreement with them because of all the young men and women who were in schools and universities that could not afford it. So what they would allow is that I would take that corporate card, photocopy it, and do the photocopy on both sides with my signature on one side and the name of the person identified as a beneficiary. So they allowed for about 20 sub-memberships under L. So any of those students, and we gave them out to mostly students, and we started from the level of indigence, as it were, those who could not afford it.
Yeah.
And we shared this. So that's how a lot of those young people got access to that facility. So there's so many other things we did I can't just exhaust here, but as you ask questions, some of them will come back to me.
In fact, I have so many questions. One of my first questions, I don't know if it's a bit controversial, but Mr. Victor, whenever I talk about the founders of ALS, it's about 4 or 5 men. So were there any women that were part of the beginning of ALS?
Yes, I did mention the Justice of the Court of Appeal, the president of the, yeah. She was the first facilitator of authors in Abuja. Well, now the question is, when did it transit from AIA to ALS?
Yeah.
I'll explain that a little. One was because there was a lot of crisis between AIA and ANA, Association of Nigerian Authors, as it was then constituted. And the fact that AIA, from what I was told by feedback in the media and press and all whatnot, because we got a lot of coverage from the local traditional media at the time, they always came to me and said, "Hi, people didn't know that they could belong because they thought it was only for authors." So that got me thinking about the process of renaming it. But given what transpired, like I said, in the crisis days, it was a case of shutting down AIA completely. And then eventually, about a year or two later, in 1998, we were resurrecting it as ALS.
So,
I hope other people might be interested.
Yeah, so guys, you can always ask questions in the chat. If there's some things you need clarity for, you can ask. I can see one hand up, Captain Olumide.
Yeah, my question, Victor, is I would like to commend you on the fact that you I don't want to say in those days, it's not that long ago, but in those days, you had to go to ministries and physically hand out bits of paper.
Mhm.
My question is, if you were to do it all over again today, in other words, you didn't do it when you did, you're starting today, would you use the same method or would you use technology? By
Well,
that I mean, would you use WhatsApp groups or, you know what I mean, WhatsApp groups to invite people? And would you use virtual reality headsets so you could have book readings with everybody watching through a headset? These things are coming. You know, let's not deceive ourselves. I mean, what you did was the hard way, which was a good way in those days. But I don't think you've been to a ministry in Abuja in the last 2 years, because it's very different from what you're saying. They don't even have electricity in most of them. But nevertheless, would you use technology or would you stick to the old method?
I'll say again, a combination of the two. I've seen that in spite of the pervasiveness of technology in our lives, people still believe in receiving handwritten notes or letters or anything that speaks more of you have their, or you want to get their attention, or you have them in mind in a special way. Now, in essence, let me put it in another way. Without technology, we wouldn't be where we are today with the expansion of ALS. And I would say WhatsApp and social media has played a major role in that wise. So, I mean, this is a transition in our lives. We've all moved on from I don't even remember where my calligraphy pens are anymore, because anything I want to do, I realize I can do on a computer. And at that time, I didn't even know how to use one. Even though I had a computer in my office, I always had secretaries. So being an orga, as it were, I always felt I could hire and fire anybody. But by the time I realized that there was a need to learn the, knowledge, have that knowledge myself, things transited and I followed the transition, and it hasn't stopped in my life even up to now. As I speak to you, I have a literary organization, as it were, called Read Africa, that are registered here in the US. And the only way I've been communicating with the partners I've established contact with is through the same, the social media platform and emails and all whatnot. So, but if it were that you asked me if I had the opportunity to do it all over again, would I do the same thing? The answer is yes. I would never check. I tell people who care to listen or who are interested in knowing some of the things I've been through, that my joy in being part of this organization or being the founder of the organization is not in the title of founder. No, I do that as a function of focus and the fact that people will have someone to point a finger to or hold responsible. But I've always been publicity shy. I consider myself a farmer of minds. I don't consider myself, like to me, a Joyce or East as a brilliant writer. No, I can do a few pen to paper work or computer. I do memos and all whatnot, but I'm too lazy to, string words together. But at the end of the day, I pride myself with the joy of knowing that this organization is standing because people like Tenny, Dike, Joy, all of you here, that Alheri, Timi and Co, are all part of this, Sanusi. If I keep mentioning names, like I said, you're so few here, but I can tell you specifically, in my record of knowledge of those that have been part of the journey, there's nothing less than 1,000 people in my diaries and contact list of those who have played one role or the other for the success story of what ALS is today. So yes, I would do it all over again if I had a chance.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Victor. I mean, there are a lot of things in my mind, and what I'm trying to do now is to sort of like trace the chronology. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Oh, yes. To trace the chronology of ALS. But before that, Mercy, you have your mic open. Do you want to say something?
Not really. Sorry, I didn't know. Let me mute it.
Okay, but are you sure? Because I can, Mr. Victor has mentioned that you were someone that was there at the early days.
Well, let me just say something since you want me to say something. The early time, I worked in a company called Global Minerals, and he had a friend, my boss, called John Uche. If I don't mention his name, I won't link him. I will not talk about Victor Anoliefo. John was a communicator. He's a writer. We've been trying to trace him. It's unfortunate. But he comes to the office to see Mr. John Uche. And one of those days, he discovered me. I was writing a poem on my table. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm writing a poem." I was actually writing. He said, "Can I read?" He said, "Okay, read for me. Let me not read." And I took my time to read for him. And then when he was done listening to me, he told me about ALS and that they were meeting and that he would want me to come. And then John picked me and we went together. Truly, ALS then for me was a place where if you get there, you don't know who is who. You don't know, like he said about Hige, you will never know about, I have this kind of position. It was a place where they express themselves. You won't even see authors trying to like glamour, it's me first. Everybody wants to be a listener. I think that was for me what tripped me about ALS. Everybody wants to see another work that is better than theirs. So tracing back, and now I kind of feel there are some things missing from the early ALS. That's the truth. Like the captain asked him a question, will he start all over again? And truly, if I would say it, technology, it's good, but one-on-one and expressing for me is ACT, and that is ALS, and not technology. Yes, it had to, evolving. We cannot but evolve. But ALS for me is that meeting, watching you read, listening to your work, and the body expression is not the same. For me, that is ALS. So I just want to say thank you to Mr. Victor, who sometimes at the dying minute, there's no venue, but somehow information will get to us that this is where we're meeting. Like he said, we had line in my office, so it was always easy to get through to some of us, but it was a task. Right now, it's very easy. Yeah. But if you tell me the commitment, then you will know those who really are writers, who really are born poet, because there was a yearning to always want to be there. Mr. Victor, God bless you.
Thank you for that, Mercy.
Yeah. Thank you, Mercy.
Yeah.
And Mr. Victor, Mercy has raised something because this was 24 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us on here were still, I'm sure some people were not even born and some people were still toddlers. So we can't even properly grasp what it must have meant to try to disseminate information at that time, to try to gather people in one location regularly. So, Mercy was saying that, one way or the other, the information needs to get across to them. Did that mean that you used to often have to call people directly to say, oh, this is where ALS is meeting today on a regular basis, to call everyone?
Definitely. That's what it means. And more so visiting them physically. And it took a lot of driving. I didn't know what I mentioned. I was on the verge of saying that ALS almost cost me my marriage at that time. Because I actually got married in the same 1998. And my wife couldn't understand this passion for something that was just taking so much out of me and bringing nothing to the table at home. And it was a challenging period. I almost gave up, but she's also happy that I didn't now. Because I'll give you a testimony from that experience of those early days. And at that time we laughed about it, but it wasn't fun at the time when it was happening. But I was anchoring the British session because by this time we had divided ourselves, Rockview, British Council, Nikon, Noga, then eventually Transcorp and Goody. So we had people who would anchor, like I said, Kenny K, Dr. Tanya, and what's his name? Oh, God have mercy on me. So many names are eluding my memory. But a lot of them are in here. Ambassador, is it any color? It will come to me again, like I said.
And Chukwumerije.
Dike started somewhere down the middle. I'm just going back to the early days, you understand? So Dike was more of the Transcorp Hilton in the mid time of that period. But why I'm going back this way, because when I was at the British Council in those days, my wife, this was 20, no, we're now in the 20s, 2022, or no, 2004, more or less, yes. And my last son was to be born, and there was a problem, medical problem, and the doctor said, look, if you can go outside the country, to be the best opportunity for you. So I had to choose between where family was in the US, here where I am now, and the UK, where we had my wife's sister in Ireland. And the best option for us in terms of cost and everything was Ireland. But when she got there, I think the Irish government had embargoed something about automatic citizenship once you have your child in the country. But that wasn't the reason why we went there anyway. But we said, while we're here, why not try and get that benefit? Eric, I know you know this aspect of Nigerians always looking for opportunities for their kids. Anyway, so to cut a long story short, here I was. Normally after the sessions, I would stand by the door to greet people and take questions, post-event questions and interactions. And I'd cracked a joke in my closing remarks. I said, when it got to my turn to have a party in my family, the Irish government had closed the door on that opportunity. And I just stood outside, greeting people, saying the good nights and so on. And eventually, this gentleman walked up to me, and portly looking, bald, sorry to use the expression, white guy. And he stood by me and said, I'm waiting for you. I said, okay, look, come in, let's join that conversation. He said, no, when you're done. So when I finished with the last group, I went over to him. He said, that joke or what you said in there, was that true? I said, yes. I said, please, and who are you, sir? Because not everybody that introduces themselves in a crowd of about 100 and something, most times you can remember all the names. So he reminded me, I said that he gave me his card, that if I could come over and see him the next day, he would do something about it. To cut a long story short, he was a priest, an Irish priest, and it turned out that if you had an endorsement from an Irish lawyer, priest, or doctor, one of the three, resident in your country, that you could get that opportunity. He had collected the form and everything, and all I had to do was sign and go to the embassy and submit, and they mailed to my wife. And one thing led to another, so that kind of reduced cost and everything for us.
Yeah.
So I think that was the turning point for my wife to begin to embrace the sacrifice I was making at that time. And I wanted to share this for, not that it wasn't entirely a fruitless effort. I mean, nobody was making money. If anything, just like Tenny has been spending her own money for Elite Fest and everything.
Yeah.
We can tell that the habit and tradition has been biting everybody who's been involved. I can tell you, even Aisha Sambo here, who's been so quiet in being, will I call her an off and on member. I know the contribution she's made also. Not to talk of Timmy and let me stop mentioning names, but
because
many of us have embraced that.
Yes. No, thank you for that. That was a beautiful story, Mr. Victor. And it goes back to this idea around passion and value and just people recognizing these things and appreciating it in different spaces. So I think that gentleman that was at that event recognized the passion that you had for the arts, and then he wanted to do something in return, so, and doing something in return doesn't always mean giving something monetary, but maybe giving your time or giving their support or making introductions. It was a beautiful story, and there are so many of the stories as far as ALS is concerned. There's one question I want to ask you. So sometimes when I talk about ALS in some spaces, I say, oh, we've had lots of very interesting people come through ALS over the years, but please confirm to me. So now you mentioned Bolaige already. Are there some other people that are somewhat known in Nigerian history or even more contemporary Nigerian history that have come through ALS at one point or the other?
Many. I can't even, like I said, at the time we submitted that proposal to Obasanjo, he was the grand patron of the Minister's Culture House, which was known as Kunuago. We've hosted Shoyinka at a point, and Chino Achebe, the first time he came into Nigeria in a wheelchair, it was at the first Culture House. He was our special guest that evening. I can't count how many, I mean, if you can think of anybody who's been a minister, or let me just say a high-ranking government official, a captain of industry that has interest in creativity one way or the other, at one point in their life, they would have touched base with ALS. Now, in the same vein, all the heads of missions in Nigeria were part and parcel of our network. And I'll even say network in the manner in which they supported a lot of the things we needed to do. And part of the reason why this book came into light is because it was actually sponsored by the, like I said, the Royal Netherlands Embassy. Michelle Dillon, who was the 2IC at the time, was a very active member. And a lot of these people were not just being members in their high office. They were there as, like I said, hands-on participants in everything we were doing. In fact, there were times we would divide, even if it were for political reasons, some of the venues into two and have a debate between like the people pro-government and those anti-government, and have mediators in between. We had so many fun things that were so real and so, direct in terms of the impact they had in our lives, that it was hard to believe that these things were playing out in a creative field. Now, to talk about this book again, like I said, very briefly, the fact that we had a project with Royal Netherlands Embassy to run a workshop for students on creativity. At the time, I can't remember all the people I set up as committee members, but I do recall, I think Jerry Adesewa was one of them. And they had finished the work and we had spent about 70-something thousand naira. And I said, look, the balance of the money should go back to the embassy. And they went back, and in fact, I went with them and they told us they've never had this kind of situation before, that there's no, when they give you money, you do what you want. They don't have the process for receiving, a balance of the cash back. I said, well, we didn't use it unless you give us a reason for. So eventually I insisted they should take the money back, because I didn't want to start creating an opportunity for somebody to think that we're not being accountable for what we're doing. So they kind of gave us a certificate, but that action was what gave light to the sponsorship of this book. Completely understand. And at the end of the day, many other such things, like really identify with the gentleman on a personal level with me. I can't count how many people at the time, just my signature alone, I don't even have to write a note and say, please take this to this ambassador if you have any problems with visa or whatever. And that was it. There were so many wonderful things that came out of the sacrifices I made, having this kind of relationship with all the people that I had access to. But if you ask me, yes, that was for ALS, nothing for me per se in that sense.
Yeah.
Right. And I never thought of making it a business ever, and I would never do so.
Yeah. So I'm just confirming again that you mentioned Chinua Achebe. So Chinua Achebe came through.
Oh yeah, she was a special guest for the first Kunuago. And ever since then, like I said, we've had other, renowned people of, what I say, well-known, well, let me just say people that are known in the industry of creativity one way or the other.
Absolutely.
If you want to mention.
Absolutely. I was just going to go to Aisha now. She has something to say. Aisha?
Hi, yes, I'm here. I just wanted to say thank you for this meeting. It was so interesting listening to Uncle Victor and, the history of ALS so far. There is something that I want to share. And I'm hoping that I could just hear from Uncle Victor and anyone else who may have had a similar experience. So I feel quite connected to this story because in I'm still young, but in my earlier youthful years, I used to volunteer quite a lot, like so much. And it was a response to my father actually not letting me work at the time. I really had a desire to just be in the workforce because I wasn't sure what career pathway I wanted to take. And so my friends and I started this foundation together in 2013. It's called Green Youth for Youth Foundation, short for Y4Y. And our ethos is basically to encourage volunteerism within the Abuja community, because we believed that through volunteering, you can discover yourself or discover what you want to do. And this was, we were maybe like 16, 15 years old at the time. And then we go into like our early 20s, mid 20s, and my team just sort of falls apart because obviously no one's getting paid. And I feel like maybe they all had other, goals that they wanted to meet up with in life, or just felt it's time to make money and therefore I'm no longer involved. And it took me some time, like even therapy, to really grasp the situation of what was going on, because these were people that I had worked with for a long time. So I guess I'm just wondering if you've ever had, such experience where perhaps a key member or key volunteer or an entire team sort of just fizzles out simply because, they're no longer getting paid. And how do you sort of recover from that? Yeah, that's my story and question.
Is that a question? Well, let me also acknowledge the fact that having related to you, I'm glad you're still doing some of the wonderful work you've been known for over the years. Let me simply say that, when Mercy mentioned about Dike, even when Dike became very active in ALS, I didn't know what was going on. There was a point in time, I kind of when I started work with Society for Family Health, I kind of became less available. And Dike became such a bulwark of support and active coordination of everything that was happening in ALS. And how that happened, if you ask Victor Anoliefo, I truly don't know. But if you ask me, look at Tenny sitting here today as how Tenny came into function. If you ask her, she probably, the night we met and one thing took, the things happened the way they did, the way it has brought her to full circle of where she is now. It wasn't planned. It was just an introduction of, oh, how are you? This girl is very, I said, fine, let's talk sometime. And here she is today. And all of you who have been playing this role one way or the other that I don't know, some people that I call and talk to are so excited to say, oh, you're the founder. I said, no, don't look at me that way. I don't consider myself as an icon of reference in that sense, because everybody has belonged in a very solid way, one way. Everybody is an owner of this organization. Now, what you're saying there for Aisha is simple. I've had times in my life through this journey, like I said, especially with family, that I had almost given up. I've had times people disappointed me so grossly. People that you put up so much of your hope in doing something, and they just wouldn't show up, or they would just, abandon whatever. And I just had to jump right back in there and get things done and make sure that people were, satisfied one way or the other. And you remember, like I said, it's easier now to pick up your phone and do what you do with social media platforms. In those days, it was a choice between going for a business opportunity or simply following this thing that had beaten me so well. I didn't know whether it was malaria that was worrying me or something, but I was losing my mind. But I just couldn't stop. And I'll tell you something else that is an interesting story. I forgot to mention somebody whose piece of literature here, Dr. Buchai Hebuike, is a very big doctor now in the US here. And his son is I think he's an author of about 3 books. He had an opportunity at a very young age to dine with Obama because of his creativity. Buchi was a man, I wish I had told him to be here, sorry. I just wasn't paying attention to what I was doing about this program today. Buchi was somebody who was almost, he would be, from what I knew then, on the surgery table, maybe doing an operation, and suddenly the muse will come upon him. And if he doesn't write that poem, nothing else gets done. That's the kind of mind he had. Until we worked together, he became part of the system as well. He stacked up so many notebooks of almost like Newton's Paradise Lost, that kind of elegy, you know, so much voluminous writing of beautiful creativity. But at the end of the day, what am I trying to say? These kind of people were people who found, if I may use the word Aisha, use therapy in being part of the process. People found opportunities in business. People found opportunities in academia. People found all sorts of things. But one thing that kept them together, look at Dike. When I tell people that Dike is a lawyer, he's a happily married man with children, he's a performance poet, what else does he not do? You understand? He's a taekwondo specialist, you name it, you know, and they only see the creative side of him. They don't know there's other, he works in the oil industry, for crying out loud. So he's not your pushover, you know, performance poet or whatever. He has capacity for financial success many times over, where he nurtured himself economically, but this is his drive and passion. And there's so many other people like that, like this Dr. Buchi I mentioned. I don't know how many of you here, like the first time I met Timi Odwesu, the first thing I told him was, young man, you're going places, you're writing. Did I know where he's going to end up today? And he's still in the journey. So I can go on and on talking about this kind of impact on people. But suffice it to say that at the end of the day, it is the commitment we have to what we love to do. And I'm happy that, Aisha, you never give up in that wise, because that is the spirit that keeps legacies going. When you are doing it and you're not counting the cost in terms of whether you get credit for it. Like I said, my greatest joy today in being part of ALS is that most of the people who are members don't even know who I am. That's what gives me happiness. And if I may mention that as well, because of the fact that there's a lot of behind the scene effort going on, and we simply spare the responsibility, you know, from some of the generality of members, we had to set up a structure of active, let us say, backbone support. We have the trustees who are the owners of the organization, owners in quotes, and then we have the advisory board, where we have the board of patrons. All these are kind of interconnected in the manner in which they relate to help get things and accesses for whatever we need to do when it's necessary. But it's just that since COVID came, and Tony can tell you more about that, it's been difficult, you know, connecting with so many people. Priorities have changed a lot over the years, more so now with the war going on in Ukraine. A lot of things are not happening the way they used to be in the world anymore. But all said and done, we should never relent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Mhm.
Thank you, Aisha, as well. I think that this was a great segue to Dike because you referred to him many times in your comments. But maybe just before Dike comes in to tell us a bit about ALS from when he joined in, let's hear from Timi Odweso.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to answer a little bit about what Aisha said. Like Mr. Victor and everyone else said, the discipline is therapeutic for a lot of people. And while it might appear that people are leaving, like they might fizzle out at times, if it's therapeutic for them, if they enjoy it, they're going to try to replicate those communities, societies like ALS, wherever they are. I'm going to give an example of myself. For the past 2 years, I've been in school in Zaria, so I've not been in Abuja as much. It means I've had to miss out on ALS. But in Zaria, because I've missed out on ALS, there are literary communities there that I'm presently leading. So I'm leading the Creative Writers Society in my school, and we meet weekly too. And it's a replica of the Abuja Literary Society. We're doing the same things, and it's giving the same vibes. Sorry, Gen Z stuff. It's giving the same vibes as ALS, because again, I think ASU has been on strike for a while now, and we've been getting reviews from people who are like, "Oh, I miss this because it gives me it gives me the space to just talk about stuff, to write, to express myself and to express my creativity." So I think that, yeah, people might leave the volunteerism space for a while, but we always find our way back. I think even in ALS, people that have left, people that are really active, they always find their way back when it's their time to get back. Yeah, so.
Let me, before you bring it, Dike, let me just respond. Thank you for that evolutionary process in your life to me, because I can see that there are so many other organizations doing almost something similar. But I think the next way to go is to try and forge some kind of partnership and relationship. Maybe the next thing we should plan is some kind of conference of literary organizations or creative organizations. But having said that, I just want to emphasize this. I remember the spirit of volunteerism. I remember, Tenny, you can account, I don't know whether Didi was there at the time. And when I pulled Bishop Kuka, who was then the chairman of the advisory board, but he's no longer the chairman, but still on the board, to come and give the certificates for the first Elite Fest, correct? You know, it took me like a whole day to coordinate, let me use the word, capturing him to be part of that simple process. And it was Architect Eze who lent us his facility. And I can't remember who sponsored the food anyway, maybe he did too, but God bless him for that venue. So when we finished, there were about 30 recipients, correct, or thereabouts. You know, when I was taking Bishop Kuka back to his flight, because I had to hang out with him throughout the whole day to make sure he showed up at that event. The first question he asked me was, how did you manage to get so many people to volunteer for something like this? I said, forgive me, I wax spiritual on this. I said, it's the Holy Spirit. And one thing led to another. I think Teniola eventually became part of the Kuka Center, correct? So that is one thing.
That's true.
So I'll leave it to you there. So never, like I say it again, whenever you have passion for something, you love doing that is useful to the community that you are part of, please don't let people who disappoint you stop you from doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Victor. So now, Dike, I mean, we're glad you're able to join us. We've been hearing about ALS from the beginning, I mean, from when it started in the 90s up until now. And if you can just come in by introducing yourself, I think Mr. Victor has done a bit of an introduction for you, and then telling us when, how, and why you joined ALS and what it's been like so far.
Thank you, Tenny and Sir Victor. Always a pleasure to hear from you and to see you. Really, after people like Sir Victor talk about ALS, there's really nothing for me to add. But I guess it's just to share my own experience. I must have joined ALS about 2009, 2010, I think. At the time, I had just gotten a job. I was young family, but I needed an outlet for my creative side. Work wasn't doing it for me. I just needed somewhere where I could express my creativity. And my wife told me that there were these people that met at Silverbird and talked about books. So I went along. And I liked what happened. I liked what I saw. So I just started going regularly. At the time, Mr. Ken Ike was also, I think it was he used to anchor quite a bit with Ogajide. And Ogajide used to do the book Jam. And then Kabura Zakama Doc used to do the book club. I just started going every Friday. It became my Friday thing. And if I like something, I sort of commit to it 110%. So I would go early, help, arrange the seats, just because I like the place, just there helping out here and there. And then, I did a couple of slams, won a couple of slams, just became a regular ALS member. But the type that I didn't want to just be a member. So like I said, I'll come early, I'll help set up the seats, I'll just do whatever I can to help out. And then ALS at the time used to change anchors, I think every year or every 2 years or something. And so a new set of anchors came in, but at a point, then I think Sir Victor asked me if I would anchor. Maybe a year and a half into joining ALS, or 2 years or something, asked me if I'll anchor one of the sessions, one of the open mics, and I said, no trouble. So I started anchoring the Hilton open mic. I think it was the first open mic. I started anchoring that one. And then feeding into what Amina Sambo was asking about. You know, the thing about volunteers is that they come and go. I've been in ALS long enough. I've seen like 3 generations of volunteers. So after a while, some people, you know, they come into ALS, they sort of grow, and then they move on to other things. It's not so much that they fade away. They just, not everybody can stay in ALS forever. So they move on to other things. But you just find that there's a new set or a new sort of crop of people coming up that you tap into. So at the time that I started anchoring in ALS, we sort of went through that transition. A lot of the other anchors, you know, getting busy with other things. And I found myself filling in for other anchors. And before I knew it, I was anchoring on Fridays. So every single Friday, I was anchoring at ALS. And this went on for about 2 years, I think. That was the time when I think Sir Victor engaged with the family, with this place he was working at. Mr. Ken moved to Lagos. And I found myself at that point having to stand in the gap and just keep moving on until new people show up. You know, so I was the sole anchor for about 2 years or so. And then I then helped to bring in a new set of anchors, Musa, Ulo, I can't remember who the third person was. And then from there, you know, they anchored for about 2-3 years, and then a new set came in. And since then, I've also, after having played a very active and central role in ALS for a while, where, you know, it was like, one was the, yes, in Serum, Sanusi, thank you, reward in Serum. So I haven't played like this really active role in ALS for a while, where it felt like one was even the face of ALS. I thought that was not really the ALS culture or spirit. ALS is not built around people, you know, a person or whatever. It's really a community where it's the communal spirit that drives it. So I was very intentional about sort of taking it back to how it was, you know, where there are many people, you don't really know who owns or who is this or who is that person or who is president, who is founder, who is running. You come into ALS, you don't know. Everybody just, it's open. You have, you know, from day one, you feel like it's home. From day one, you can assume responsibility. And so we sort of slowly sort of have moved back to that sort of culture of openness and volunteerism, being driven by the group spirit rather than being built around the individual. And then also in my time, ALS. So in my time, ALS, a new demographic entirely came in. When I joined ALS, it was quite a bit older, you know, but in my time, the transition to a much younger demographic. Was also a bit more, will I say, serious when I first joined it. Now there's a greater element of fun, entertainment, play, and then ALS. I know there was a time before me where ALS used to do drama and things. Didn't meet that time, but then since I came on board, I've seen, you know, the festival has come up. ALS has evolved in many different. At some point, there was a teen session and all kinds of things are happening now. You know, I'm just happy to be part of what I really think is a beautiful community. It's so rare in Nigeria to see people gathered around, not tribe, not religion, just shared interest. I really believe that that's the seed of the sort of society we want to be in the future. I also think it's the seed of ideological politics and people being able to gather around shared values, not just blood and religion and things like that, which was really my main attraction to ALS, the nature of the community itself, and why I'm so committed to it and remain really committed to it. And I'm happy that the spirit of volunteerism lives on in ALS. It's still very strong. People come and they make enormous sacrifice, quietly, silently. Sometimes nobody ever hears about it. You know, and I think it's such a wonderful thing to see in a society like ours that is typically so transactional and positional and all that. You know, so that's sort of my own experience of ALS and why I love it so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dike. I think your passion is infectious, if we put it that way. Mr. Victor, did you want to say something?
Yes, Dike has resurrected in me the plethora of names and situations. You know, like I say, this kind of thing puts you on the spot, and sometimes you just go blank and you're trying to remember everybody at the same time. And I'm happy Sanusi typed in reward incident. And, you know, like I said, if I keep mentioning names, I'm bound to miss out a whole lot more than I can remember. But there's also another reward, the first storyteller, as it were, and the first slam champion. So, but that aside, I'm just looking at it because as I'm looking at this list of names in front of me, it kind of gets me dizzy. I didn't know Augusta Imamon was here. She's a member of the team I call the 3 A's. Augusta, Adeze, and Azizat. 3 of them are the coordinators of the ALS Team Talk. And I believe they'll be reporting to Dike for whatever happens in their activities. And I know Tenny is planning something with still part of the Lit Fest for the teen group, correct? So I would love to have Augusta at least throw some light there because part of the process of coordination is sometimes just setting up and letting them run. Like Dike said, it's just some people do something so quietly, just find them so passionate and committed, you don't even know who's behind it. So Augusta, on that note, I also want to appreciate you. And for all of you with Dike's leadership, I can't, every day I talk to Dike, I told him that if he had struck out as a presidential candidate, he would probably be competing with the obedient group by now. But I don't think he believes in that direction for himself now. But anyway, I just wanted to touch on that a bit and say, Dike, thank you. God bless you for being who you are. And no matter what it is, Tenny and you have been the major bulwark of coordinating the transition from so many hands and all the people who have continued in that same spirit. We've just been handing over batons from one group to another. And I see what Augusta says, it's a matter of trust, really. If you can't trust someone to be part of an idea, then that idea is not worth anything. If it's worth something, like the saying goes, if you truly love something, let go. And that's where we are.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Victor. And I think even on that note, it would be good to bring in some voices from the more recent members. I know I joined ALS perhaps in 2016. I came to Abuja and I wanted to join a reading community. I heard that there was an Abuja Literary Society and I tried my best to find it and to join it. So it would be good to hear from others. I mean, so Mr. Victor, you mentioned Augusta. It would be good to hear from Augusta if you're able to speak, and maybe after Augusta, Sanusi, even Timmy, because I don't think we've heard how you joined and why you joined ALS, and just anyone else that is in the chats. I would like to share, you know, their experiences with being parts of the ALS community. So starting with Augusta, are you there? Can you speak?
Hello, Tenny. Hello, Mr.
Hey,
Victor.
Augusta.
Hello, Dike. Hello, everybody. Okay, how I joined ALS. So I was in Enugu at the time. I was final year, 2016, I think. And Dike came to Enugu to do his show. That's Man-Made Gods. No, sorry. the first one, the one made in Nigeria, right? I think it's made in Nigeria. So he was performing and I was like, oh my God, this is like a dream. Like sing poetry, drama, dance, and everything in real life, not just on TV or hearing about it. So after the show, I walked up to him. I was like, "Hello, my name is Augusta, and I like what you're doing." I think he mentioned when he was saying something, he mentioned that he came from Abuja. So I was like, "Oh, I live in Abuja, and I will soon be going back to Abuja. I would like to join this kind of community, theater, dance, poetry, and all that." And then he was like, "Sure, sure, sure." So I took his number, and when I finished school, I came back to Abuja and I contacted him. So I think he probably added me to the info group. So I got invitations, and in 2017, I came to ALS, and I think that was when Eric was leaving. So it was Eric sent for that day, and he was reading some of his stories. So they now mentioned that Mr. Victor was the founder of ALS. So I also went to meet him. I was like, Mr. the way I am normally. I went to meet Mr. Victor. I said, Mr. Victor, oh my God, I hear you're the founder of ALS. I'm so happy to meet you. I love this place. It's so beautiful. I love, artistic stuff. And then he was like, oh, I think he wasn't even paying attention to me. So he just told Eric to give me his contact, and then I contacted him after, and we met and we discussed, and voila, I told him about my plans for having like teen stuff, a spelling bee and things like that, and he was like, okay. And I met with Ada and Aziza, and that's how we started doing Teen Talk in 2017, 2018. And so yeah, that's the story. So we did it for like 4-5 years. And I have not moved on. I moved on, yeah. But it's just interesting to see that I was trusted with something, and like I was still new. I didn't know really anything, and we just made it happen, and it was such a beautiful experience.
Yeah. And I personally know how much time and resources and energy dedicated to the Teen Talk, Augusta. I know that even when maybe when it got tough, you still stuck by it because of the passion that you had for it as well. And I'm glad that you've been part of the ALS story one way or the other. Thank you. Thank you, Augusta.
Thank you.
Let's see. Sanusi. Anyone else I'd like to share, please indicate as well. Sanusi, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
So, hi everyone. So, ALS has been, I tell people sometimes that ALS is basically my church. So, because I first knew about ALS, I think sometime in 2013, because I started following Dike on. It was during ASU strike, I think, then. Yeah, that 6 months long ASU strike between ASU and Goodluck Jonathan then. So it was, and I was wondering what to do with myself. And then so I was following this online, and one time he said, oh, we are hosting Igoni Barrett, this writer, this weekend at Salamander Cafe. If you're around, come around. So that was my first contact with ALS. So I came around, and it was just this, nice people who love book. Everyone was talking. I think that's where I met CJ Benson. And of course, the Igoni Barrett was also a old-time friend. And then Dike was there. He performed his piece. But I was still in school in Uniben, so I returned to school. But whenever I was around, I'll show up. And 2015, I remember attending a couple more times than I usually was able to. And then 2016, I became like a more frequent member, where I came around all the time. And even when I served in JOS in 2017, I still just stopped by, come to ALS and everything. And so since then, it became from just sitting at the back, listening to everyone participate, not even participating directly, but just seeing everyone and not really socializing. But I think for my first 2 or 3 years in ALS, I rarely socialized. So I just listened and then went home. And for me, then it was really a transition for me as well, because by 2016, I just graduated from uni. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then sometimes when I come around, I think it was around the time that I first spoke to Dike. And I told him, yeah, I'm trying to find what I want to do and all of that. And he tells me, don't worry, you find it. And ALS was kind of like a refuge for that time. because I would spend the entire week at home. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have anything to do. And then I would look forward to Friday evening when I'll come out, participate. And it felt good coming to somewhere. And that's how, like my whole journey in ALS. So in a way, while I was sitting in the background, I paid attention to everything. I kind of knew everyone and knew who was doing what. I kind of knew all the things. I knew the older members who were there all of those times because I just listened. And I mean, so in a way, some of the things, when people mention names and I go and they say, oh, you know that Pablo? Yes, because I was in the background. I was just a fly on the wall at the time. But so I mean, so when the opportunity came to actually participate, volunteer my time and so I'm like, why not? Why not? I'll be happy to do that. I give my time to some other things, but this seems more useful and kind of rewarding, like in terms of like how it felt. So with the Elite Fest in 2018, remember telling me, oh, Sanusi, can you help us with this? And I was like, sure. And that's how I became a part of Elite Fest since then up until now. And then I anchored the book club for 2 years, almost 3 years, and then anchored the open mic for a while as well, and kind of coordinated the slam. And then people usually ask me, you talk about this ALS, do they pay you there? And I say, no, they don't. Like, it's a volunteer thing, and then you spend all your time there. I'm like, yeah, it depends. I think for me, it was like, it depends on what you see as benefit. So, but for me, first of all, it was just, I love doing it. So that's where it came from. So, and then second is, it generally helps. I think I've seen so many people come to ALS and improve themselves and grow and kind of find their footing and all of that. It was also just beneficial to me in terms of where I was psychologically. So it was kind of how do you call it now? It was kind of a therapeutic space for me, because whenever I came here and then just come there and then I listen to people read the poem, people share, and then eventually it also kind of become like just a resourceful network. I remember some jobs, some gigs, some opportunities, and in fact, I don't think like I'll think about how far I've grown and developed myself without kind of thinking the huge role ALS played and all the people that I met in ALS. So it quickly became like this resourceful network of people who can help you achieve what you want to achieve, whom you can support achieve what they want to achieve as well. So and that was on the side. It kind of came along later as something that just helped me in my life. I hear Mr. Victor said what he said about how it helped him in his life as well. And I was like, that's interesting. So, because it's been the same for most of us, if I'm speaking correctly for a lot of us here, it's like, it's improved our life. So, I mean, I love ALS so much, and I think people underestimate how much value ALS brings to Abuja, to Nigeria, and just the world in general. I mean, we got a royal visit some time ago, and then authors from all over the world come around and like, oh yeah, have you heard of ALS? And they visit Nigeria and like, oh yeah, go to ALS. And so that's, I mean, we kind of would have to brag about that and know that we've done so much. Yeah, but and all these amazing people. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to share. But I can't even list all the names of people and everything, and it's amazing. Yeah, so that's basically my own story of ALS.
Yeah, I mean, I think I met you also in my early days of ALS, and I also know how dedicated you've been with the festival as well. So thank you so much. I think you've been a really big part of ALS and even the ALS story as an anchor and also as part of the festival team, and just as a very, familiar face, that took ownership of ALS many times. I'd like us to hear from from a few more people. I don't know, is he still here? Deji Kolawole, are you able to talk? So for a little bit of a different flavor. Or
I thought this cup would pass me by.
no, I want to hear from you because I want to hear how you joined, because I may be a bit unfamiliar with your own story.
I don't think you will be familiar anyway. So nice to see Sir Victor again. So I joined when the former GM External Relations for NLNG was launching a book. I can't remember which year it was now. And I'm trying to remember his name, man. I'm sure Sir Victor will probably remember him. So he was launching a book, and I think ALS was hosting it. So my boss in the office then, because we're in the oil industry, you know, invited me to come over to Hilton. And so that was how I came in. And they said, oh, this is ALS, blah, blah, blah. And so they talked about this book and everything. And after that, they said, okay, if you wanted to join, you write your name, your email address, and they will get, you know, they will get your contacts, and then they would send you invite. So I'm not one of those people that Sir Victor wrote his nice calligraphy and writing for. You know, we are the Gen Z. We got emails to come.
I'm glad my mic was muted. I was laughing.
You know, so yeah, and after that, quite a number of interesting things. So I try to go on a regular basis. Even the times that I was not living in Abuja full time, I used to be in Abuja every other week. So I will come, and then you had different people. I think somebody had mentioned it. I think, okay, it was Sir Victor that mentioned it. You know, you had people with different skills or arts that will come and show up. People will play guitars, people will do some artworks. There's a particular guy in Silverbird at the time, you know, who used to do some painting and, you know, do some very crazy stuff. And there was this man that owned a hotel of Gimbia, who was even teaching us guitar, how to play guitar at the time. And luckily I was living somewhere off of Gimbia at the time, you know, so, but the man, of course, got frustrated with us because we were not so serious, you know, with learning. So for me, ALS, I don't want to use the cliche of therapeutic, but it's your, I'll say it's your go-to place on a Friday evening, you know, where you just chill out, and I'm mostly, you know, quiet there, and, you know, just to generally enjoy the scene and be detached from you know, the hustle and bustle of the city. So yeah, it's an experience. And I would just say, okay, so now I mostly live in Lagos, and I would like to have something. I know Sir Victor mentioned something about Eco Literary. I don't know if they still exist or where they exist, because I live on the island and I've not seen any literary club that I could join. So maybe those of you who are more established in this kind of things can let us know how to form something like this for the literati on Lagos Island. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Tenny.
You know, the reason why I had to also mention your name is because you've also been a big support to ALS. You said you've mostly been quiet, but when we started the festival, and the story of the festival will be a story for another day, I was selling joy. The festival was one of the first few ALS projects that required money, you know, so that couldn't just run on its own the way ALS events have run. And you, Deji Kolawole, you're someone that every single time we would have the festival, you would support, you know, one way or the other financially. And I just wanted you to also know that we don't take that for granted, you know, in giving back in that way. So, Mr. Victor, you want to say something? You're muted.
I was clapping for Ayodeji. But I wanted to take off from what Dike said. These brochures. Sorry, I can't remember the name of that person. So many people were supported by ALS or were part of ALS in their book launches over the years. I just have 3 copies of over 30 something. But the point being that we became a reference point for creating poetry. Even if you wrote a book on mathematics, we could craft drama out of it. So that was a very popular thing that was happening at some point in time. And some of the cast members, I look at the names now, I wonder where they are. Some people are all over the world, some are here. And at the end of the day, I just want to emphasize this tradition in the manner, I said this earlier, in a manner in which we have been able to sustain what's been going on, for the fact that people are not stepping up because they're expecting to receive all the accolades or whatever. They're just stepping out of the passion and conviction of what they love to do and to see something nice work. So it is in that wise, I'm also recommending that let there be some kind of partnership, nurturing going on, because I hear and see a lot of, even on the ALS platforms, a lot of promotions and adverts and publicity for many different things. And I'll be pained if those legacies just die off because they don't have this kind of, continuity, interest in them by those who are participating. And if for any reason, for those organizations we've given a leg up in, existing in their own way, in the manner in which they do the same things we do, one of the fundamental things we've always advised them is to make sure that it is as selfless as possible. Because I'm not saying you should, like Teddy, identify some things need money to work. But if you don't have the manpower, what is money without us? The entities that drive everything.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if you just position your mind, oh, I need money to do this, you will never get anything done. So it's about doing the little you can, and then somehow the integrity of what you do would always bring that money to, to support you one way or the other. We've not had a humongous kind of financial support that we would love to for most of the things we do. I would also like to say that maybe that's in the near future. But all these activities we do, has been driven by Teddy and Dike, still have some level of, people support from, say, the American embassy, the British, and so on and so forth, but maybe not recently. But this is part of the process, because if you stand for something good, goodness will come to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Victor. So I want to very quickly at this point also mention Ida Oluwagbemiga. So she's not in this meeting, but she's currently more or less, running the administration side of ALS, also a volunteer, very tirelessly on a weekly basis, ensuring that we have the flyer for the week, preparing the newsletter for the week, coordinating social media, and how we've just always had people like this, coming and just really dedicating their time, their energy, their resources to ALS. I wanted to bring Dike in back at this point, because Dike, in fact, Mr. Victor has said some of these, but even to me, it's been incredible how much time, energy, and resources you have put into ALS. Just very recently for the festival, I know how much we burdened you with many things, organizing the play without funding or self-funding the play that we had as part of the festival, giving us your sound and lights at no cost, and just many other things like that. And just always, saying yes, and just always being there for ALS, even when we felt that we needed to revive the culture at the open mics, making yourself available. You must be one of the busiest people. Is that English correct? One of the busiest people ever, or one of the busiest persons ever. You have Simply Poetry. So what keeps you going, and what can you say to the rest of us on this call that are hoping to be able to dedicate the same level of dedication, we'll take it like that, to some of the different endeavors that we're pursuing?
Thanks, Danny. Well, it's sort of, I said when I spoke first, honestly, ALS, I'm very passionate about Nigeria. It's not passion for the nation is very real, it's very personal. And I just see places like ALS as, like the vision of what the sort of society I'm looking at, where Christians and Muslims, Northerners and Southerners, all faiths, all tribes. And then you're just sitting around discussing a book. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter who your father is, whether you have money, whether you drove to the meeting or you came in a taxi, you write your name on the list. You write your name first, you perform first, So for me, it's just a vision of the kind of society I want to be. So it's something that I saw and I thought, wow, I love this vision. And I had gone around every other literary group in the city. And each one, the first day you enter, you know who is the president, you know who is the secretary, you know who is running for publicity secretary, and I just thought, that the same poison you find everywhere in Nigerian society. Everybody's crazy about position, nobody wants to do the work, But I got into ALS and I just didn't know who is the president, who is the founder, everything was just. So that spirit caught me. I had a good role model, Mr. Ken used to moderate. He was, if the meeting is 7, it's at 7, and when he was leaving for Lagos, we had a chat, and we just talked. He said, look, and then he said, I'm going to Lagos, just try and keep things together. And then you have a Sir Victor, you're talking about sacrifice, people that have given their whole life to keeping this thing. I don't know, Tenny, but this small thing, they get to me, there's just seeing people, because that's also so I just thought these are my kind of people, there are people that are doing things I'm passionate about, and they're doing it in this very quiet, selfless way. And I'm happy a community like that exists.
Yeah.
In Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And all of you are also like that. So.
Exactly. I was going to mention now Onye Madu, who also at some point was running point on ALS administration, and she was an anchor also for a period. She's not on this call, but I feel like I should mention her name. Then I want to bring in Joy. Joy has been the deputy director for the festival since this year, and also maybe, getting closer to ALS administration. Joy, would you like to say some words? Are you there, Joy?
Yeah, it's a bit noisy on my end. But I don't know. I'll just like to say that ALS has been really an amazing space for me. I'm a creative. I don't write as much or do as much creativity as I would like to. So ALS is just like a fountain for me. And then I agree. I think somebody, maybe Mr. Victor, talked about how therapeutic it is to volunteer with ALS. And I agree. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the spirit of the way ALS, it's just maybe the spirit of the way that ALS came to be. But I've also found that working with ALS has really been quite good for me too. So thank you, Mr. Victor, for allowing yourself to be a channel to bet this. And yes, guys, you guys are pretty amazing. Working with you has been pretty awesome all these years.
Thank you, Joy. And thank you, Joy, because it's also been amazing working with you, and just how much your baby is a festival baby, for example, because she was in the belly when you were running around for the festival last year, and then she was there in person when you were running around for the festival this year. And it's just a lot of stories like this. So next year is going to be ALS's 25th anniversary, if my mathematics is correct. And I was talking to a young guy, he's a filmmaker, and he was saying that we ought to do a documentary So I'm hoping that we're able to unpack even more of these stories properly on some sort of platform even then, because we haven't even begun to even reach the tip of the iceberg, really. There's so many stories of writers and poets and artists that have grown, as through their membership in ALS, their projects that have come about. I've seen people begin entire careers through the connections that they have made at ALS, thanks to the sacrifices that Mr. Victor made and that he continues to make, the sacrifices that Dike made and continues to make, and the sacrifices that everyone else, has been making for the society or for the community. One beautiful thing about ALS is that people always ask the question. So they send an email or they make a phone call to us and say, oh, what does it take to be part of ALS? And we say nothing. It doesn't take anything. Just walk in anytime that we're meeting and you're a part of ALS. I think that is beautiful. There's literally no barrier to entry. Everyone is welcome. Everyone is invited. There is no judgment. All we ask for is respect. And I think our overall goal is to entertain each other literally, but also help each other grow in our various creative pursuits. It's now 9 o'clock, I believe, GMT +1. It's been such a pleasure having this conversation. It's going to be uploaded on YouTube, and the intention is to just have a resource out there that somewhat documents, some of the stories behind the origins of ALS and even its current status or its current existence. Like I said, we hope to be able to expand on this even a bit more in a fuller project ahead of the 25th anniversary next year. Again, this is the Abuja Literary Society Book Jam. It happens every last Friday of the month. It's the only event that is currently still online to allow for other people that are not within the city to connect. You can join us next month. Next month, I believe we're going to have a workshop with Adeze Anna. It's going to be on, I think it's going to be on creatives and the law, so things around copyrights and just how to protect your intellectual property as a creative or as an artist or a singer or a writer or anything. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Dike. Thank you, Mr. Victor. Thank you, everyone. And I don't know if does anyone want to make a last words, Mr. Victor? Okay.
I was waving goodbye. I was just realizing that my time is different from yours. You guys are late in the day and I just want to go out to face other businesses. But God bless you all. Thank you so much for this time and opportunity. And I look forward to the expansion strategies you have and what we can do. What I'll start doing going forward is to dig up a lot of the interview sessions. I have some of them in newspaper cutouts I kept somewhere between here and my library back in Abuja. So I'll try and put them together and make them available to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last words from Dike?
No, no last word. So we'll all meet again.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night and a nice weekend.